First, it was Andy Kotelnicki. Now Tom Allen is being linked to a Power 4 job.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show, and Tom Allen, rumors are linking him to a Power 4 defensive coordinator job in the ACC. We're going to talk about that. King Mack returns to Penn State. But in that same breath, it looks like two defensive backs are going to be leaving Happy Valley. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Tom Allen has certainly been a polarizing figure among the Penn State fan base. Some people really like him. I certainly do. Others don't. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section about this. But Clemson seems to be a suitor for Tom Allen as its next defensive coordinator. And there is legitimacy to these rumors. Clemson really wants Tom Allen. He is one of Dabo Swinney's preferred candidates for the open defensive coordinator job. So there is some legitimacy here. As far as concern goes, I mean, we're going to talk about it, but don't just dismiss Clemson. Clemson, initially, the speculation was, hey, in terms of an overall big board, who would they pursue? And now this is starting to materialize that Clemson really wants to go after Tom Allen and bring him over from Penn State for a lateral move here. So, and for what it's worth, I know it's the internet, but Clemson fan city seem pretty confident that this is going to happen, but there's nothing official as far as interviews go or anything like that at this stage. And we saw how the Andy Kotelnicki to West Virginia and all of that turned out, but there were interviews and everything else in the process. And I asked around myself and hearing that, yes, Clemson is at least intending to strongly pursue Tom Allen. Clemson needs a new defensive coordinator, and with the body of work, I mean, they're Allen's not the only one. They're trying to pursue other defensive coordinators, but this is one of their most preferred candidates here. Now, why would Tom Allen make a lateral move? Some would consider this a step down. I don't want anyone to dismiss Clemson. Clemson is a Power 4 school. They just made the college football playoff, granted as the 12th seed, but they won the ACC. Dabo Swinney has won national championships here. So do not dismiss the Clemson Tigers as a serious suitor for TA here. I think this, depending on how much Clemson is going to pursue Tom Allen, I'm not going to overlook this as, oh, this is just your everyday casual rumor here. Because when I look at his coaching tenure, he spent a lot of time down south. Allen has coached in the SEC. He spent time around Florida. And this is his first time really being in the Northeast. He was born and raised in Indiana. He coached in Indianapolis for a high school team and then ultimately got the Indiana Hoosiers job. So outside of Indiana, he's really been on the southeast part of the country for his coaching tenure. And maybe Clemson is going to try to outbid Penn State. Clemson is by no means hurting for money. This is a Power 4 school. They're in the ACC. They've won national championships. I know that Penn State is further ahead in the present because Penn State just made it to a national semifinal and Clemson got bounced in the first round by Texas. But do not dismiss Clemson. This is a little different if it's a different type of school. But I think the Tigers and Dabo Swinney, with the respect that he still carries in college football, this might make sense. And this is strictly from an outside view. From just talking to Tom Allen, listening to him, and seeing Dabo Swinney from afar, I mean, it seems like their personalities match. I feel like they'd have a great relationship, but that's strictly my opinion. That is strictly my opinion here. But what gets interesting is why would Allen make a lateral move like this to go from one Power 4 school to the other? Because you just built a top 10 defense. You just made the national semifinal. Penn State seems pretty committed on resuming running a 4-2-5 defense with the way that, hey, King Mack just came back in the transfer portal. They retained Zach Wheatley. Dejon Lane is an up-and-coming safety. So you have the players to continue to construct Tom Allen's defense here based on these portal moves, and they're not finished recruiting safeties either. And why make a lateral move after one season? Maybe it's a comfortability thing. Maybe he likes the southeast part of the country more. I mean, it's certainly warmer, but you just got settled and you had a pretty good season. You have no connections to Dabo, officially anyway, Clemson, or the ACC, really. So when I look at this, it doesn't make a lot of sense when it meets the eye. But not everything was perfect in Tom Allen's first season in Happy Valley. Let's just put it that way. So maybe I'm reading the tea leaves a little too much here, but what if Clemson makes some promises that Penn State can't necessarily keep? And when I say that, at times there were just some inconsistencies between Allen and Penn State and James Franklin. For example, he moved up to the booth. Tom Allen's a football guy. He wants to be on the sideline. He wants to be involved right there in the middle. He's a football guy. And he was moved up to the booth. Was that his decision? Was that something that he had to go along with? Now, don't get me wrong. The results certainly justified the decision, but we don't know for a fact that everybody was on board with that, or that they like that. And then the communications. There, like I said, inconsistencies. Why is the play call going from Tom Allen to Dan Connor, Penn State assistant coach and former Penn State linebacker, to the players? There just seemed to be these lapses, these gaps in communication. There were always talks, and the players would say how that, they like Tom Allen a lot, but there's certainly a generational gap. So there were just these communication inconsistencies at times, and I wonder if that just plays a part in all of this. Now, an interesting article that I read that about Clemson pursuing a different list of possible defensive coordinators. And when they got to Tom Allen, they mentioned how Dabo Swinney and Allen have a lot in common in terms of their faith and their personal beliefs and everything else. So that could play a factor in all of this too. If James Franklin and Tom Allen's relationship was not the strongest after year one, that certainly could play a factor in all of this. So this is initially, like all rumors, it's just beginning here, but I do think there is some legitimacy here from the standpoint of Clemson definitely wants to interview and pursue Tom Allen as a candidate. Would he actually leave Penn State after one season? I don't know. This is a big deal, though. This is absolutely a big deal because Tom Allen just constructed a top 10 defense for Penn State. They just went to the national semifinal. And after one season, I just got done talking about, hey, Penn State's in a great spot. They get, James Franklin has all three of his coordinators back, Andy Kotelnicki, Tom Allen, Justin Lustig. That is a luxury to have when you are trying to maximize this window of opportunity to get to the national championship. And now that throws a wrench into all of it, especially when you could potentially meet Clemson in the college football playoffs. So that, and then with the cycle and where everything is in Penn State, teams are already finalizing their coaching arrangements. There's not a lot of open available candidates. So you have to do the same thing that Clemson is trying to do, poach another coordinator or an assistant coach, or maybe you go the route of Chip Kelly, trying to get him away from his head coaching job and making him a coordinator, right? You get my point here, is that you are going to have some extra work cut out for you to try to get somebody. Because remember, they were pursuing Tom Allen in December. We're now in the middle of January here when it seems like the dust had settled. So this is a big deal. And we'll see how it plays out ultimately. Of course, as things materialize, and if and when they do, we'll have a short list of defensive coordinators. But naturally, the names that come to mind, Elijah Robinson up at Syracuse, he's the defensive coordinator there. Was a grad assistant at Penn State, of course, played at Penn State. Danton Lynn over at USC would make a lot of sense since he played at Penn State too. But those are just the immediate names that come to mind. Certainly, they're ideal candidates, but this is not an ideal situation simply because Allen is responsible for a top 10 defense and would be leaving it behind after one season. Things do get interesting, though, as King Mack was a part of Penn State, transferred to Alabama. Now he's back at Penn State. What does that mean for the safety room? Why this is important for Penn State going into the 2025 season? We'll talk about that more on the other side of this break. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on your progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. That is TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. That is TurboTax.com/guarantees. The King has returned, return of the Mack, whatever puns you want to use for King Mack coming back to Happy Valley. This is a good move for Penn State across the board because King Mack is familiar with the Penn State football program. Now, granted, different defensive coordinators, and we'll see what happens with the Clemson situation and the rumors there. But King Mack is returning. There's familiarity. They know what kind of player. James Franklin knows what he's getting from King Mack, and King Mack knows what he's getting from James Franklin and company. And this is someone that could factor into being a starter, whether that is, let's assume for the sake of it, Tom Allen running a 4-2-5 defense. They're going to need safety help. Penn State is going to need safety help. They're losing KJ Winston. They're losing Jalen Reed. Jalen Reed just announced officially for formality's sake that he's going into the NFL draft, but he's exhausted his eligibility. So other than Zach Seyko, there's not a lot of consistencies at the safety spot. I mean, you got to replace two high-end quality starters. And those are guys that I think Jalen Reed and KJ Winston will be NFL starters for what it is worth here. So King Mack coming in, I mean, this was, he had a strong freshman campaign. Seemed like he was going to ease into more playing time as a true sophomore, and it never happened. It never happened. But he ended up leaving for Alabama. He was one of their better special teams players. So let's talk about the positives of King Mack coming back. So even though he did leave for his second season at Penn State, him returning now gives you a starter, gives you a versatile skill set. He could play slot cornerback. He could play safety. He could play special teams for you. And Mack was used in a variety of ways. I like his vision. I like the way that he recognizes plays. I like the way that he can read offenses, and he can be used in blitz schemes, in coverage, in zone. So he's a very smart, cerebral player, and why I think he's going to factor into starting time, or at least contend. I won't guarantee him a starting spot, and neither will James Franklin, but conversations were certainly positive because King Mack isn't going to just come back for the sake of being a role player. No, he wants to compete for a starting spot in a territory that he is familiar with. So when you look at Zach Seyko as that free safety, those two other safety spots, the lion and then that traditional strong safety, I mean, King Mack could contend for either spot or even play a little bit of defensive back, right? We'll talk about Jalen Kimber coming up in the final segment here. So King Mack will certainly be utilized in a variety of ways, and it's just a benefit to Penn State. So I like this move overall. As far as the safety room goes, Jalen Reed and KJ Winston offsetting those losses are going to be massive. You're not going to do that overnight. But I do like the defensive backs as a whole. So to bring in A.J. Harrison to the conversation, the versatility of Zion Tracy, is he going to remain a cornerback? Could he be a safety? The emergence of Dejon Lane. I think now that Dejon Lane is going to go through winter workouts, spring football, because remember, he did not enroll early, and this was somebody that they burned his red shirt. He did not enroll early, and they said, you know what? It is worth to burn your red shirt here as a true freshman. So Dejon Lane is going to be somebody that is going to factor into Penn State's plans at safety. Vabu Toure is progressing well. Don't forget about players like Lamont Payne and then Tyrese Mills. Tyrese Mills is interesting because he has one more year of eligibility given the JUCO college rules and everything else. Tyrese Mills would be a massive addition from the sake of you get a veteran player, you get someone that's played a lot of college football, and he factored into some playing time down the stretch. If it weren't for some injuries, I think he would have had more consistent playing time for Penn State as the season progressed through this 2024 campaign. So the safety room is in a pretty solid spot for the most part, and King Mack only adds to that. And they are not done pursuing safeties as well. So we'll see what they continue to do through the transfer portal to add some names, but it only creates competition. It only creates depth. And I like, my preference, of course, would be to, yes, have Jalen Reed if he had the eligibility, and of course, bring KJ Winston back. But since you don't have that, I do like what Penn State has as a backup plan here to get the most out of the back end of its defense. Now, with that being said, King Mack as a defensive back comes in, but in the process, Penn State's expected to lose 2 defensive backs here, with Jalen Kimber declaring for the NFL draft, even though he had a year of eligibility remaining, and Cam Miller is expected to enter the transfer portal. We'll talk about the cornerback situation specifically coming up after the break. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets for events even easier than before. And that's not just sporting events. That's concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And what does Game Time Picks do? It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. You can use Game Time Picks to find tickets for any upcoming game, including the College Football Playoff National Championship. Going through the deals is a breeze, and you can find great value on all kinds of seats throughout the venue. There's the super deal in particular that will give you the best deal, best value for that event. You can see the seat views before buying in the app, and it'll show you the total cost up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, Penn State is set to lose 2 cornerbacks, and we'll talk about those players in just a moment, but Penn State's going to be okay at cornerback. No, let me rephrase that. They're going to be better than okay at cornerback because in combination with A.J. Harris, Zion Tracy, as I mentioned, Elliott Washington, Adavian Collins, all 4 of those players they're going to be that combination, that 4 are going to be the best, one of the best in the Big Ten in the upcoming season. And then you have the development of a John Mitchell, a Kenny Wosley, and Antoine Belgrave Shorter. And then you bring in talented freshmen like a Darius Dixon and a Jameer Joseph. Cornerback honestly might be in one of the best situations that Penn State could have possible. Those guys are going to play. They're going to contend for a lot of playing time. So if one player needs a break, needs a breather, enter the next player. So if A.J. Harris is your starter on the boundary, Elliott Washington is on the sideline, they can rotate in. Penn State really has a nice setup at cornerback. So it makes sense why a player like Jalen Kimber, who did have eligibility left, and this is obviously not ideal. This is somebody that started. This was someone that played a lot for Penn State this past season and did make somewhat of an impact. Was he elite? Did he have that same kind of caliber that A.J. Harris did? No, but he anchored that second cornerback spot on the boundary, and it is not ideal to lose a veteran football player that has played a lot of college football, but best of luck to him. I do want to make people aware that Penn State can offset these losses. And then Cam Miller going into the transfer portal. This doesn't surprise me for the fact of what I just mentioned. All the names that I talked about, A.J. Harris, Zion Tracy, Adavian Collins, Elliott Washington, all of these guys can play. And Cam Miller certainly came in with the expectation this season that he was probably going to have more playing time and didn't necessarily. He also had that moment in the national semifinal game against Notre Dame where he might have slipped and fell. Maybe he got crossed up by the Notre Dame wide receiver. In the process, he allowed that game-tying touchdown to Notre Dame and didn't hold his assignment. So I wonder, those conversations probably did not go over very well. And Cam Miller is expected to enter the transfer portal. He is expected. He has not made an official announcement at this point. Maybe adjacent to this podcast, that might change there, but expect Cam Miller to be in the transfer portal there. So the defensive back room is going through some changes here, but cornerback is a really strong spot. And that's why it does not hurt Penn State too much that Jalen Kimber is moving on to the NFL, moving on to the pros, and Cam Miller is expected to go into the portal and look for a new spot in college football. I like what they're doing with the safety spot as well. Overall, You couldn't ask for more from Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter. Really, the way that the defensive backs have been, the spot that they are in. Penn State, especially going up against the likes of Oregon and Ohio State, and I know it didn't work this time around, but with AJ Harris coming back, he is only going to get better. A guy like Elliott Washington's only going to get better. Saw a lot of promising football from Audavian Collins. You saw his playing time increase down the stretch of the season and into the postseason. Zion Tracy got better as well. And then, as I mentioned, all the potential of Antoine Belgrave Shorter and Kenny Wosley and John Mitchell, those guys are developing well. And then you get Darius Dixon and Jameer Joseph, who are probably closer to some playing time rather than further away. Darius Dixon is arguably the best prospect in this class of 2025. So Dixon, who knows? Who knows if everything goes well? Could certainly factor into some playing time at the fall. I know those are lofty expectations, but that's where the defensive back room is. Then you get a King Mack, Tyrese Mills. I think it makes a lot of sense for Mills to come back. So now you have a veteran playmaker at that safety spot, in addition to Dejon Lane and Zach Wheatley at that free safety spot. So for what it's worth, Penn State really needs to focus on retaining a Denai Dennis Sutton, a Kobe King, but for the most part, defensive back is the least of their concerns. Let's just put it that way. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, covering a lot here between Tom Allen, the return of King Mack, and what the secondary ultimately looks like. And between draft declarations, so a lot of players had made their announcements that, hey, they're moving on. They posted their farewell messages as a formality. So if you saw things from Sal Wormley and Devon J. Thomas and Tyler Elsdon, it is because they have maxed out their eligibility. But it is fair to say, Jalen Reed, it is fair for them to say, I am declaring for the NFL draft. They deserve that respect since they went through their college football career. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. As always, if you are new to the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, and we'll have more coverage about it, talking about Penn State football, basketball, and wrestling, all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.